So this is Live at the Bike, PokerCraft, the Monday podcast hosted by myself, D22 Sosa, Wayne Chung. This is my guest, Dan Abrams, writer, producer, director, and consultant for poker shows. He's consulted for the World Series of Poker, the WPT, and Live at the Bike when they first started. So you want to tell the background of that story?
Sure. So we're recapping because we had some technical difficulties. So for the Twitch folks, bear with me as I recap. I credit Rounders for really starting the poker boom. Everyone gives Chris Moneymaker credit and all sorts of other people. I think that Rounders definitely reinvigorated interest in poker, and I was part of that wave. And I was playing in those minuscule poker tournaments at the Bike and Crystal Park Casino a million years ago. And poker was doing so poorly on TV because they hadn't yet had whole card cameras or stats or anything like that, that ESPN gave up on poker on TV. And Steve Lipscomb produced the World Series of Poker for Ross Television for the Discovery Channel, and it did well enough. And then they said, let's do it again, and Steve Lipscomb was set to produce it again, but he didn't want to do it because it wasn't a very lucrative gig, and he had a more lucrative gig available. And he knew that I knew poker, and he knew that I was producing shows for E! Entertainment Television and a million other places. And so he said, Dan, how'd you like to produce the World Series of Poker? And I said, oh, of course I would. And so I produced it that year, and that was the year that Chris Ferguson and TJ Cloutier went up against each other. And I was the first producer, this is my mini claim to fame, I was the first producer to put running stats in the show. This guy's a 36% chance of winning, this guy's 64, etc. And when I, did that, it was actually a fight with the network because the network didn't want anything complicated. There's a general prevailing view among network executives that everyone's are idiots and you can't do anything complex. And I was like, we shouldn't be teaching people how to play poker. That's too basic. The people who are watching the World Series of Poker already know how to play poker. Showing the rank of hands is embarrassing. Let's get more sophisticated with it. Let's show the running stats. Well, I won the fight on the running stats, but I still had to show the rank of hands because, TV is also about compromise and making the network happy. And that show did so well. I wasn't smart enough to come up with the idea of whole card cameras because somebody else had come up with that, a decade prior. But I only showed the hands when I was selecting which hands to edit into the episode. I only selected the hands for which I actually knew the whole cards, whether they were either shown at the showdown or whether I had to talk to a player afterwards and find out what they were holding. And that episode did so well that ESPN said, we'll take it back. We want poker on TV. And they used my format, quote unquote, my format, going forward. And at the time, I wanted what everybody else intuitively wanted, which is I want to know the stack sizes, I want to know the blind to stacked ratios, I want to know how much time is left in the round, and all the more sophisticated information, more data, more numbers, all that stuff that everybody takes for granted was a fight 20 years ago. And so I did that for the World Series of Poker, and then Steve Lipscomb, who was deserves all the credit in the world for being the visionary, he partnered with Lyle Berman to create the World Poker Tour. And then once he was like 6 months in, he was like, Dan, I really need you. Can you come on and help me with post? So I was the post producer, writer, co-writer, working with Grimm and a few other people. And I worked on that, and we, honed the format a little bit more for the World Poker Tour in its first season. And then subsequent to that, I was a producer on E! Hollywood Hold'em, which was on the E! Channel, that Laura Prepon produced, getting a bunch of her, star celebrities from that 70s show, etc. And Phil Locke, shout out to Phil Locke.
Shout out to Phil Locke.
He was the host of the show and the dealer, and that was a lot of fun. And then around that same time, I was consulting for Evelyn, and I had a small role to play at Live at the Bike. I was saying things that I wanted, like robotic cameras and having RFID in the cards and everything. I wasn't the first person to think of this. A lot of people were saying this is how things should work. So at the time, we still had to do the equivalent of whole card cameras. And then Evelyn and everybody did a great job, really creating it. And I had a tiny, tiny role in that. And then I consulted on some other poker shows, an international show. And then I started like writing strategy columns for Card Player magazine. So if you go to Card Player, you can, if you have a subscription, you can still look up my old articles. And I started tutoring people in poker and like giving lessons, and it was like some big stars and celebrities that I won't name, but big stars that you've heard of. And then a community of very wealthy people had me tutoring them, and then they started buying me for other people and other celebrities, because when you're crazy rich, they can buy whatever they want. So the only gifts that you can give are gifts that the other person hasn't even heard of. So that was like, I was passed around, and poker tutoring is my cover story for my gigoloing.
And
I wasn't supposed to mention that.
And that's unheard of. So shout out to Henry Orenstein, who actually was the one who did the.
I think that's the guy. Yeah.
He also like patented Transformers as well. I don't know if you knew.
Yeah,
this.
I think he was like really big in that.
Yeah, he was like Transformers originally Japanese, and then he was responsible for bringing them over to the U.S. I played 7-card side high stakes with Henry Orenstein, like 100, 200, 200, 400 commerce.
Nice.
Yeah, I didn't even know who he was, and then I didn't know who a lot of like high stakes players, people I played against, who they were, and then afterwards, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, but thankfully, like a few of them, I mean, I think I'm well liked by a lot of them, if not all of them, but some people definitely have a vested interest in like what I do and the projects I do. So ever since coming on Live at the Bike as well, and my other projects, they're just like, oh, and they're just like so happy to coach me, and just like when people talk about Hollywood, you know, you've been in the mix a lot longer than me, but people actually want to help you.
Yeah.
But they just can't hand you like the golden keys.
Well, that's a big thing of like, you know, if you're somebody super powerful's son or daughter or something like that, you have a nepotism connection, they're looking for any reason to help you and they'll bend over backwards. If you're just a friend, there is this weird thing about they don't want to be around people who are sweaty or desperate or awkward. And so if you can just be chill, this is like Matthew McConaughey right here, that goes so far. And so if you're talking too much or making too many jokes, it's better to tell too few jokes than too many jokes.
Oh, I was kidding.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
And if you can just be a nice person and not like a vocal jerk, generally people are like, oh, well, what do you got? Like, how can I help you? And they can't give you the keys to the castle because a lot of it is about reputation. So they're worried if they stick their neck out for you, if you could embarrass them. So the more things you earn on your own, it actually makes them want to help you more. And so whatever you want to do, the more that you can make your own stuff, do your own stuff, get some sort of external validation, it makes it easier for people to do favors for you. It ends up being synergistic. Whereas if you come across like an asshole or, you know, you piss off too many people, a lot of these, you know, so Wayne and I play in this writers game with very, very big sitcom writers, hugely talented, hilariously funny, really sharp, merciless, and when you play with them, you know, that's the pinnacle. Like, you know, and they don't want to feel uncomfortable around you. And so if you can be chill, they'll want you around more, and then they keep weeding out the people that make them feel uncomfortable.
So yeah, we've had those writers on the game, and you were in the show as well. Massive sitcom writers. Jamie Ronheimer did How I Met Your Mother. BK and Jamie Ronheimer did The Ranch. Jamie Ronheimer did Will and Grace. David Fury did 24, Pinky and the Brain.
Sure.
Dave Bickel did Young Sheldon.
And King of Queens.
King of Queens, yeah. Tony did that one as well.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot of just endless. Phil Stark did Dude, Where's My Car? And That 70s Show, South Park. Yeah, so it's a really good like social environment. Even if you like don't want to be in Hollywood, it's just like, man, it's just a pleasure to be around those guys.
Well, I mean, they're hilarious, and you know, if you like, I can be funny sometimes, but I'm not at their level. So if you make too many, they'll friggin' cut you apart.
Oh yeah, and like, you know, I like when I'm in there, I'm like with a bunch of professional comedy writers. I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to say anything. I don't even want to crack a joke. No, but they're really nice and they laugh at some of my stuff. And then when I go too far or they just want to needle me or make fun of me, they're just like, oh, that failed. But
Well, they love that. I mean, that's like
I know.
Most sitcom writers' rooms just notoriously merciless because they don't want to hear the hack joke. They don't want to hear the cliche joke. They don't want to hear the easy joke.
Yeah.
Like you could write an AI algorithm on how to write the easy pun or the easy joke, and so if you go for that, you might actually get a laugh from an audience member. But these guys, they're
elites.
I mean, it's kind of like being a porn star. Like, what turns them on is at such a higher level. They're numb to the basic stuff. Like, a porn star looks at a Playboy, it's hilarious to them. Whereas, like, same thing for comedy. You need to get really dark, really obscure, really clever in order to make these guys laugh. If you go for the easy joke, they'll murder you.
I can't speak to that far because I'm not a porn star.
Well, you won't admit to it, but if you look at Cover's eyes there, we recognize
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they call me Wayne Hung. But it's funny because Bullets, he's a CEO. Yeah, Josh Millett. He's a CEO of a company, and then Garrett messaged me out of the blue. It's like, do you know Josh Millett? I'm like, yeah, and he's like, yeah, my girlfriend just interviewed for his company and got a job there. I was like, okay, just the world's so small, right? So I was like, yeah, if she needs anything, we're going straight to the top. You don't even need to ask her boss or her boss's boss or boss. We're just like going straight
That's
to
a huge company,
Bullets.
and it keeps getting bigger.
So, yeah, I mean, it's good to just, like, know people. And then I think she brought up, or like, Live at the Bike or something like that. And it was like, oh, yeah, and somebody in my home game plays Live at the Bike. He was like, yeah, Wayne, he's, like, big. I'm like, no. Garrett Adelstein is big. Wayne is nothing.
You're known, but he murders the game.
Yeah, but he's just like in this generation of poker celebrities.
Right.
I think he like him, Joe Ingram, Doug Polk are definitely the top. Dan Zach's up there, but just like it's just like they're the ones carrying the torch for like this
generation.
Andrew Nemi, Brad Owen.
But I mean, Garrett is a player, whereas Doug is like.
Was a player.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's also super active on his YouTube channels and like making videos. Like he clearly wants to be a personality, and he's got good chops.
Yeah.
That's like a big part of it. Anybody who wants to do anything, everybody knows about the 10,000 hour rule. It's so important. I once produced this microscopically budgeted cooking show pilot presentation, and the cook just didn't do her homework. And you can't do that. You need to keep getting better at your world. And so, Wayne, you're so comfortable on camera and so conversant in this world and have such expertise, that makes you more charismatic, which is why I recommended you when my other buddy Grant, who is a writer-producer on Brain Games on Discovery Channel, we can't talk too much about it.
Yeah, thanks.
But they needed pro poker players, and I was like, Wayne's perfect for this because he's not going to choke. He's charismatic and he knows poker, and when they want somebody to be able to bluff or you deliver.
I did it. I did it, guys.
And they loved you.
Thank
we heard back that they loved you. And there are other people that you could get who just come across as too sweaty or desperate or
palms
awkward.
Are sweaty.
Yeah.
Knees weak, arms are heavy.
That's very Eminem of you.
Mom's spaghetti. But thank you. Yeah, so I'll be on National Geographic Brain Games in December. And
not Discovery, National Geographic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you're busted now.
Yeah.
We'll let you guys know when that happens, and thank you for hooking me up for that. And I've, ever since I started doing the show, I did want you in a future episode. I don't know if I even mentioned it before, but when I saw you in the Hollywood Home Game, I'm like, dude, come on the show because you were involved with Live at the Bike long before I was. You want to tell that story a bit?
Sure. I mean, everybody recognizes that there's just an insatiable appetite for poker, and everybody wants to see how other people play, and they want to hear the commentary. I mean, if you really look at it, the whole kind of Twitch phenomenon with video games, when everyone loves to watch people play video games, the precursor to that is Live at the Bike. I mean, that's basically what it was, is watching people play and then hearing commentary and then interviewing people afterwards to talk about it. If you can nerd out about a subject, that's the whole kind of nerd culture as it applies to video games or poker or sports or anything. And Live at the Bike was just a fantastic proof of concept. And it just kept getting better. You have to keep evolving. You can't rest on your laurels. You got to keep getting better and getting more sophisticated. Eventually, they started doing things that I never envisioned, and they just kept, raising the bar.
So yeah, shout out to Evelyn, Bart Hansen, David Tuckman for starting it off, and then there's been several generations of the evolution, and here we are now. We still have a lot of things coming up that we're very excited about. It takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. Shout out to Brian Watson. So that's basically the gist of your involvement. And as I said before, maybe Live at the Bike or the World Series doesn't exist if it wasn't for you.
Well, I'd certainly like to believe that. It's you never know where your impact is going to be, and you try to make good stuff. I mean, that's the whole kind of philosophy of like, do good stuff. Don't just do stuff for yourself. Do stuff that you think is going to help other people. And I've heard plenty of people argue against me of saying like, wait, you showed people how people play, and that raised the level of the game. Once people started seeing how to do a float used to be a super advanced, sophisticated move that only the top players even would consider doing, and now it's so common that it's almost swung the other direction, you were saying.
Yeah, so for those who don't know what floating is, it's just like if Dan Abrams is out of position to me, he makes a bet, and I just call and say a scary card comes on the turn, he checks, and I just like make a big bet, and then he's almost forced to fold if the card is too scary. And it's
because the call adds more credibility than a raise.
Yeah.
A raise could be seen as a bluff. The call is like a intimidating move that says, "Oh, this is exactly how I want it to be," and so you're basically calling in order to bluff on a subsequent street.
Right. So something that used to be floated is like say ace 6-6, like Dan C bets. I call, and if he has pocket kings even. Like visually, he thinks I either have an ace or a 6.
Right.
If I'm a rational player.
Right.
So on the turn, say a deuce comes off, then he checks, and I just bet it doesn't even matter what I have. That's
right.
Floating. So the evolution is when people stop stacking off so lightly. Say Dan Abrams has aces, he raises, I call, and the flop's now 8-7-6. He c-bets and I call. Now I could have the winning hand already. I could have a set 2 pair, flop the straight. But now I have fake outs. So if, say, a
queen comes, completing a straight, if you had the jack.
So it's like, if the board pairs, one, I could have trips.
Right.
He could already be beat. If a 4-liner to a straight comes out, then he checks, and I just like bet, and he just like can't even continue. Because if he doesn't believe me, he has to pay off the turn and the river. So that's like evolution, and now poker just keeps evolving because it's about strategy and counter strategy.
Well, that's the whole. Everybody references the Princess Bride of I know that you know Iocane Powder, that like any poker strategy can be defeated if you can think one level beyond your opponent, assuming odds are roughly evenly distributed. And so it comes down to, do I know how you play? And that's why everyone talks about GTO, game theory optimal, of like, regardless of how you play, what is the balanced play?
Frequencies.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote an article about it called Poker Mantras, 2 questions to ponder during the play of a hand. And the big thing is, and too few people consider this, I mean, God bless them, because when they don't consider it, it's profit for the rest of us. But one huge aspect is, how are you going to make money with the hand? So if you're playing a positive EV hand like aces or something like that, it's understood that you have the math on your side, and the more money that comes in, over time, the more valuable it's going to be. And if you're going to play a negative EV hand, well, now you have to think, am I going to get paid off bigger when it hits, over and above what I should, or am I going to be able to bluff more effectively? If you don't know the answers to those questions, you shouldn't be playing the hand. And too many people think, well, I've seen people play Jack-8 off, and so I'm going to play Jack-8 off. Well, how are you going to exceed what math says you should earn from that hand?
So the term nowadays is realizing your equity. So say Jack-8 off is like 33% against Ace-King off with different suits. So if Dan Abrams raises ace king off and I call with jack eight off in position, if I know he has ace king off or or a big pair, and then I'm able to stack him in the future street for like a lot, then it doesn't matter I was an underdog pre-flop. It's, I did
Extracting the
extract.
value when it hits.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that too few people, like, so another one of my, when I'm tutoring people in poker, I'll give away a few of my tips for the folks that are watching now. Too many people are willing to bet too big of a proportion of their hand pre-flop. My general rule for the beginners especially is you got to have 20x. So if you have $2,000 in front of you, the most you should ever be willing to put your pre-flop with a hand that you think is worse than your opponent's is $100. And if you're willing to put in $400 of a $2,000 stack with a worse hand, mathematically I think that can't work out for you in the long run. Is that you have to be against a player who's willing to fold way more often than they should, or is going to pay you off really, really big. But again, you don't have the implied odds for that to make sense. So too many people are like, oh, well, I think you're playing worse hands too often. Well, that's a different thing. If you think your jack eight off is better than the other player because they're playing 80% of their hands, well, then that's fine because you're putting your money in when you think you have the best of it. But when you talk to people, they'll quite often say, I knew I had the worst of it, but I thought I was going to be able to take it away from them. Really? Well, what about them made you think that you could get them to fold in excess of the amount of time they were supposed to fold?
Yeah, pretty much. And you, of course, helped jumpstart WSOP, WPT, and Live at the Bike back in the day. How have you seen poker evolve in like the last?
Well, I mean, when people started seeing how people played and how they, could play super tight and then change gears massively and then play their rush and then capitalize on momentum. Like people who aren't savvy, and at the time it was like almost everybody was not savvy and only a select group were, you could say, okay, when someone is stung, they tended to play more recklessly going forward. And if you really beat them, you could start really hammering on them. So if you had a big stack, you could just keep putting pressure on them and keep over betting, and then people wouldn't feel comfortable. That people weren't considering like orbits. So especially in tournaments, there might be a time when King 9 off is what you got to go with because you only have 5x. You only have 5 times the big blind. How much better is your hand going to get before you get blinded off? You need to be able to make the strong plays. And 20 years ago, people weren't even considering that. Now, when there's so much poker on TV, enough people watch that they can go, well, if that's how Phil Hellmuth is playing and that's how Daniel Negreanu is playing, that's how Phil Ivey's playing, I'm going to use those same techniques and couple that with online poker where, people are able to get, by playing 15 tables simultaneously, more hands of experience in 2 or 3 years than the old timers were getting in their entire lifetime in terms of number of hands that they were seeing. Then they got comfortable playing those really hyper-aggressive kinds of poker. And then again, the whole iocane powder, Princess Bride, I know that you know that I know that you know, it kept changing. So there was a time when people thought Ace King was just the nuts, was just an awesome hand. And I was saying, at the time, I wrote an article for Card Player about it's time to devalue Big Slick. It's just not that awesome because people weren't paying off. Like the way Ace King could make money is if somebody was playing their Ace Jack and an ace fell, you could get money because people were paying off with their bad kickers. But then people stopped paying off with their bad kickers. So then it keeps swinging. And you have to know how your opponents are playing to determine whether your strategy, your default strategy, is effective or not.
Yeah, so a lot of things is poker has gone through so many evolutions, not just the game, but no limit hold'em ever since the Chris Moneymaker boom. It's just like no limit hold'em during that time in like 2003, 2004. There was so much less information on it than limit hold'em, and because it's been like 15 years, almost 15 years. Like, there's so much more information on no limit hold'em than any other form of poker. So, people coming up in this day and age No limit hold'em is the bread and butter that we associate with poker. So when they become proficient, they have a win rate, it's pretty good, the mid stakes, and they're like, oh, should I move up? And I get asked this all the time, like, actually, I don't know the journey in 2019, what you should be doing. But there are other forms of games, like mixed games, like Omaha 8 or better, pot limit Omaha, limit hold'em, and in order to maximize your win rate, you don't have to like butt your head against the wall in no limit hold'em. And yeah, that's basically the journey of a poker player. Is you watch a lot of televised poker, you play it yourself, then maybe you play online, then maybe you play the casino, and then maybe your win rate's pretty good. Then you consider going pro, and then you find out you're good enough to cut in no limit hold'em, and then you're like, okay, my win rate is, I don't know, say $70 an hour pretty consistently. How do I grow that? You could try to
You sample the higher tables. You never go full force into the higher. You got to be willing to drop back down.
Yeah.
And table selection, everyone keeps talking about it, but it's worth
the
mentioning.
biggest, yeah.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
The cliche of if you don't, there's no point in being the ninth best poker player in the world if you're playing against the top 8.
Right.
So, that's to me that mixed games. That's why mixed games can be profitable, is because very few players are really proficient in all of the games.
Yeah.
And so with a mixed game, you can count on a substantial portion, or normally you should count on a substantial portion of those people just not being good at some of the games. And so you might be willing to give up some advantage in the Hold'em because you have such a massive advantage on Omaha or whatever else is in the mixed game.
Yeah, it's about people are so solitaire, like even when they're criticizing other players or they're evaluating their own game, they think it's about them, which is like, yeah, you should always improve your own skill, but profitability comes from a comparative advantage over your opponents.
Exactly. And a million people have said this before, that poker isn't about you making good plays, it's you identifying other people's bad plays. And so it's not so much about you creating situations as you identifying situations. When people are playing poorly, how are they playing poorly? Are they playing poorly because they're playing too many hands? If they're playing too many hands, normally that's a sign that they're playing weaker hands, because it's unlikely that they're getting strong hands often enough for that to be, reasonable. But sometimes it's because they're better. So just because somebody plays a lot of hands, it doesn't necessarily mean they're playing weaker. And you have to know, how are they playing? Are they playing like, okay, it's super cheap to enter pots and they're going to be playing the implied odds game, in which case when you have premium holdings, you got to charge them for it. You got to, instead of betting 3x or whatever, bet 6x or 7x to really punish them so that their implied odd advantage goes down.
So I've also talked with pro players who are not happy with like training sites coming out or Live at the Bike, so it educates the public. And that's kind of like a wishful thinking thing. That's like, when the internet comes out, guess what? College is going to be outdated, because it used to be that the information you get in college was proprietary and it's hard to spread that kind of knowledge. But then when the internet comes out, you could look up a lot of things, and of course there are things that you can't Google. But
well, can we do a little sidetrack here on this, because I got a bunch of things to say about this. One is, yes, all that information is available, but college is about networking, contacts. Making those friends is a huge aspect of college, and also it's the credentials. So I actually have a theory that, there's so much tutoring and, what's that YouTube, the Khan Academy, etc. So many great places to learn things. I think the next big thing is going to be credentials. So I have a theory that as soon as somebody creates a system where, they're going to have a testing program, or like the equivalent of a notary public who's going to watch you take a test, and it's going to have like 8 cameras on you to make sure that you're not cheating. And if you can really get a high score on that test, the scores on the test are what are going to be valuable. Because what that cheating scandal with the college kids, Lori Loughlin, all those actors and stars who were paying money to get their kids into college, illegally, the credential is only important if it means something. If you can just buy it, it doesn't mean something. And so passing the bar exam and passing the medical boards, etc., shows genuine proficiency in something. And I think that when somebody is going to master this and create a business model of credentialing in all sorts of topics, and those credentials are going to be what are valuable, as opposed to where you learned it. It's did you learn it? Can you prove that you've learned it? The premium is going to be on that.
Sure. I mean, a lot of things too with those premium colleges like Ivy Leagues or say Stanford, UC's, USC. A lot of it's like signaling too. Like even if
Sure.
you aren't earned in, at least your family's,
Yeah.
coming from wealth. But part of
Another side note so you can either apply and get in on the merits, or there's another way in for these super elite colleges. You can buy your way in paying directly to the university. So if you're willing to build them a library, and those are big numbers, those are, sometimes seven-figure numbers. That's always been the case. Name whatever elite university. Literally, as far as I know, virtually every single university will do this. And if your kid is too dumb, then they'll just say, we'll take your money, but he's not going to graduate, so what's the point? But if he's kind of like mediocre dumb, they'll say, okay, well, for $3 million or whatever in a new library, we'll let your kid in. And that was always the case. The reason why all these actors got in trouble is instead of doing it merit-based and instead of doing it, buying your way in directly to the university, they tried to do a middle way, which was backdooring and paying off these athletic directors, etc. And the reason why the whole system came down hard on them is they said, no. You can either do it by merit or you can pay off the right people. But if you pay off somebody else, that's not cool.
So this, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know what more to add on that, but that institution is just like, I don't know.
We can move on. We can move on.
Anyway, shout out to people who are cracking down the college systems. But I've said this in broadcast before, like college used to be like a ticket to credibility where, okay, now you're good enough for 40-year career or whatever, and now it's just like, I think it's more of a defense for credibility where it's like not, again, the keys of the castle, but one piece that signifies a positive quality.
Right.
A lot of the house players here are highly educated. Steve is a master's from Juilliard. Like Jason went to Berkeley. There's a couple programmers, a couple people went to law school. Casey and TT have a master's in engineering. It's like if you just show up to the midterms and finals and like do decently well, hey, being a house player is like nothing. They're just like show up on time to play poker, fill the games.
Don't piss people off.
Yeah.
Don't get into fights.
Yeah, don't get into fights. Be polite, be like conversational, and just like don't be a DJ and show up the next day. Yeah, what's that compared to like going to UC Berkeley? It's like, but the thing about like professional players or people who are just relatively talented at poker, they're like, oh, I hate these training sites. Or I don't like Live with the Bike because it's getting people to a higher standard. Yes, it is, and that's just like college and like the internet. It's like a natural process for humanity. It's just going to happen.
You can't stop it.
You can't stop it. But not only that, these training sites and Live with the Bike are introducing and keeping people into the game.
Yeah.
So as long as you stay ahead of the curve or you're adapting to the counter strategies, as Dan mentioned before, staying ahead, it's like it's harder now. Like people aren't punting as much, but as a professional player, one, it's up to you to stay up with the curve, to be better than your competition. 3, if you can't cut in high stakes, like I can't cut anymore, find other avenues. Like I've always loved broadcast. Like I never even thought about to go this route / be a TV player / be on the back end of a production. And then once I do it, I'm like, well, I'm definitely not turning back now.
Well, I mean, we were talking just earlier about how, you don't really know that you're good until you've put in thousands of hours of game time. Like just
Sure.
because you've won a lot or lost a lot doesn't mean a lot. Like you have to know why you've won, and if you can't recognize that, you hit a bunch of inside straights and that's super rare, like just looking at the stacks is not enough unless it's over time. If somebody's consistently earning money year after year, decade after decade, then you can make reasonable inferences. But it's comical how many people will win a tournament and think they're hot shit and think they're so awesome. And it's like, yeah, it's easy when you won a bunch of 50-50s, Like every tournament has some massive amount of luck, and you can't win a tournament without that luck. I've a million years ago, I played in these tiny little tournaments, and I was doing great playing a super reckless strategy, and all the sitcom writers in our home game will laugh about how I'm a friggin' money loser in that game. But it actually relates to when you're playing in a home game, what's the goal? Is the goal to grind it out and to maximize your edge, or you're supposed to have a good time? I mean, there are higher percentage plays that you could play in a home game, but then no one wants to play with you. Like you got to give action, you got to have fun, and if you're going to play like a nit, like why would you get invited back?
So yeah, this is the balance that I've mentioned on broadcast too. It's like when people play in those home games, they're networking, they're matching cards, everyone's being an entertainer to each other. And I've had the Hollywood writers on the show a few times. Dan was here commentating as well as playing, and we're gonna showcase some of his hands in a bit. But this is more what high stakes poker is about. It's like you're an entertainer. Like you need to go to the rich guy, and be like, hey, you want to play some freaking cards? If you're there skinning them for every fraction of a percentage, and you're not social, you're not getting invited back.
I mean, it's also kind of comical because I am definitely a money loser in that game. But, like, what is your goal? I mean, in tournaments, you have to play recklessly in a tournament. But if you're going to be playing, like, crazy, crazy tight, you got to engage. The way you extract profit at the tables, not among friends, but at the tables, is to get the suckers having a good time. If you twist the blade into the suckers, they're not going to have fun. They're not going to want to come back. And so part of that kind of like merciless shark strategy is you can devour them, but let them swim away and rebuild, and then you can chew them up again. Like don't absolutely murder them so that they give up the game. There's no point in that.
Which goes back to the training sites and the live with the bike thing. If there's none of this stuff and none of this access, once you skin them, they're not coming back. Like
Right.
This stuff actually keeps people interested. So when they're like, oh, I learned a thing or two, then they go back and try again, and maybe they do better this time. Maybe they're like, oh, I need to learn some more. But it's like,
I mean, the old timers would constantly complain, I don't want them knowing how I play. In the early days of the World Series of Poker, people were like not showing their hands to the cameras.
Yeah.
They'd like deliberately try to hide it, and we'd have to like stop the game and say, you can't do that. You have to show your cards. That's part of the show. And they were thinking, well, I don't want to lose my edge. And it's like, well, then develop more edges.
yeah, it's just like the cards are finite. You can only win so much in this certain time, and you also have a timeline. The second you're not liked, you're not in. And
I mean, there are some donators in a game, like whether it's a home game or at the casino. Let that person have a good time. They could just be super wealthy and they just have no friends, and you can be their friends. So be their friends. Like, just don't be a jerk. Like, there's no upside. We were talking before about there's some pro players that are not so great against other pros, but are exceptionally great at extracting maximum value out of amateurs, and that's a way to win. I mean, when I was talking before about how are you going to win, how are you going to make money with the hand, you don't want to alienate the bad players. And then also recognize that players can change gears and get good, and some players play better in certain kinds of games.
Yeah.
There's some players who are awesome at super casual games where everyone gets to see flops, but if it's a super aggressive game with squeezes and steals pre-flop, they can't keep up. And so, there are different, combos that can work out, and that means there's room for everyone. As far as the teaching, I do think it's kind of hilarious. Every once in a while, I'll see poker lessons from some famous people, and I think the lessons are just so objectively wrong that I'm like, either I'm wrong, totally a possibility, and when you're a poker player, you always have to recognize the possibility that you yourself could be wrong in all things. But or are they deliberately giving misinformation? Or are they giving information that they believe to be true, but it's only true with a specific subset of circumstances that aren't representative of the whole. And you'll see that if you play in lots of different kinds of card rooms, there's a different style of play. California play is different than Vegas play, is different than New Jersey, is different from, I assume European. I haven't played poker in Europe, but like people play in different styles, and that's why it's kind of funny when you'll see some players from Finland or whatever, and it's like, wow, they are playing like Californians,
Yeah, you have to adjust the game conditions is the most important thing after you have you're fundamentally solid. So what we were mentioning before is I don't know, I'm the only person I think to my knowledge who gives Phil Hellmuth props. Well, no, there are other people who give him props, but they don't quantify it like I do. So as we've seen, Barry Greenstein said this too, other people say this, Phil Hellmuth is good against bad players, but not good against good players. And I've quantified it on air, and maybe I'm calling him out, I don't know. I mean, how is he good against bad players? And I've played with him in cash games, and yeah, nothing to write home about. No disrespect, but his strength is in these massive tournament fields. If he thinks he can agitate you and get you to punt off, that's his whole stick. It's just you could be the nice guy, you could be friendly as we advocated for these cash games and network, but in a tournament, you're never going to see this guy again. It's so if he gets you to play poorly, punt off your stack, as we all know as poker players, it's really hard to be dealt the winning hand.
Yeah.
So if you could get this guy to bluff off with no chance to win, little chance to win, and Phil Hellmuth's just call, that's part of his thing of why he does well in tournaments. Yeah. So that's one example of how doing something like that, like agitating a professional player, someone with thick skin, it's not going to work. But a lot of these guys, they could be good players. They just have very poor tolerance with their emotional control.
Well, I mean, that's a huge part of it, is that they'll say a million times is that, give me a A- player who plays consistently rather than an A+ player who goes on tilt.
Yeah.
That the tilt is what ruins you.
Right. So yeah, and a lot of stuff, I mean, I don't know, that's probably a secret he actually wants to keep really well anyway, so, oh well, this is the cat's out of the bag.
Well, I mean, but the biggest criticism I have for Phil Hellmuth, and again, he's 1,000 times better than me, but my biggest criticism is you're not allowed to say, how dare you call me with the better hand? That is just not a credible complaint. When they say oh, my bluff should have worked, that's suckers talk like that. And it's hilarious to me how often Phil Hellmuth says, particularly that phrase in assorted games, is he'll make a bluff and then someone will call him and he'll say, you shouldn't have called, and that's ridiculous.
He's inciting the guy to combat it. There's just no way he doesn't know what he's saying is wrong. So if you engage with him,
except that he talks that same way when he's got legitimate points as well.
Yeah, but the whole thing is his goal is to throw you off. So
Sure.
As long as you're thrown off, if you argue with him,
Right.
then
you're losing.
You're losing because you're off of your game. So whatever he's doing, and he has more experience, with this back and forth stuff. And I don't want to throw other people who are good with live reads under the bus. It's they engage with people and get information through the engagement and then make a decision.
Right.
That's something that I
and if you're playing with them, you don't have to talk. I mean, some of the people, you might be able to infer who we're probably talking about, but if they try to talk to you and engage with you, you're allowed to say nothing.
Right.
Just, don't even say, I want to talk to an attorney. Just keep your mouth closed. Fix your eyes on one spot and try to be as consistent as possible. And if you're going to throw off false tells, be careful about that. I know too many people who think that throwing off false tells are effective, but they can just be
rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, they can be reread the other direction.
Yeah, it's happened to me on the show. It just as more information comes out, say Zach Elwood's Book of Tells, and in the past,
people just do
Mike
a 180
Caro's,
on that.
Yeah, Mike Carroll's
Book of Tells.
Yeah, Zach Elwood's reading Poker Tells. So these things, they just throw rock, paper, scissors all over the place. And it's just when people just have this huge knowledge base now, and they're just executing different things or interpreting different things. It just can be so much miscommunication, and it's I don't know. It is what it is.
I do want to share one quick crackpot theory just because
Sure.
I think they're fun. I think I just want this immortalized on the internet because I think and if somebody's come up with it before me, please mention it in the comments. I think war used to have an evolutionary advantage because it would attract the sadists from each community to be on the front lines of the war. And then in the war, the people on the front lines were most likely to die. And in that way, war was a way of cleansing the population of sadists. And so for as long as there were, psychopaths and sociopaths in each community and overly aggressive and violent people, if you got them to war against each other, one side would win or they would both have a war of attrition. And by virtue of that, the populations would be less violent. The problem is modern war doesn't work like that. The most sadistic, violent people aren't necessarily on the front lines. They could be ordering people into battle, and that's why we shouldn't have as much war. That's one crackpot theory for you.
Or behind computer screens talking trash.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like it. I really like it.
And then do I have any other crackpot theories I want to share with people?
So,
oh, yeah. Here's an idea. So my buddy Boaz and I came up with an idea. Somebody has to do this. I don't have the bandwidth to get on this. Wouldn't it be great if, Netflix logs all of your likes and dislikes and all the movies you've watched all the way through and the ones that you stopped 5 minutes through? Netflix knows what you like, and it's using an algorithm to try to predict how you'll like future stuff. But wouldn't it be better to at least have an additional feature, and this feature would be finding your taste doppelganger. So it would find the other of Netflix's hundreds of millions of users or whatever who has 98% match of your taste, and then you could each post to each other, hey, I just saw Joker and I didn't like it, and therefore, my taste doppelganger might appreciate my feedback on that because we have historically agreed. And I think that kind of a system, Facebook could do it, Netflix could do it, Hulu, Amazon. There should be a way to find out. There might be somebody halfway around the world who just happens to have your taste in films. There should be some sort of matching system. So go make that, somebody out there.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat. Shout out to Zephyrin911.
What do you think?
No, he's just like, I'm a keyboard warrior, so how do I fit into evolution? That's pretty good.
No judgment on my part.
Do you have any? I mean, there's nothing wrong with keyboard warriors. I actually enjoy responding to a lot of them. It's like when false information is put out, and I'm able to help improve that information. Even if it's not perfect or if I'm missing something, it's still better to move things in that direction.
Well, I mean, along those lines, I will force into the conversation because it's remotely related to what you said, and I'm an egomaniac, so I like to hear myself talk. I gave a TEDx talk, so everybody knows about the TED Talks, and the TEDx Talks is like the minor leagues of the TED Talk system, and mine was called "Sports Can Save Politics," and I was basically saying that just as people, the general thesis, I'm not going to do the whole pitch, the general thesis of it is, just as people can agree, rival teams, that the game will determine who is the better player. And if it's a close game, you can argue about referee calls, etc. But if one team gets 30 points, the other team gets 21 points, you generally agree one team was better that day on that game. And I think that if we applied that to politics, we'd be better off to be able to see, well, what do you care about? You should be able to figure out whatever issues are important to you. Everybody doesn't have to have the same set of priorities, but whatever issues are important to you, and then create a set of metrics for it, and then actually measure politicians according to whatever your metrics are, so that we're not so tribal, and instead we go by what we care about as opposed to just sticking to whoever's team we're on. So that was as nonpartisan as I could make it, but if you want to look up on YouTube, Sports Can Save Politics. You can see that 10-minute speech.
Okay, I'll post the link for your TEDx talk at the end of the session. So one last thing, unless you have also things to add. So different poker products serve a different purpose in the poker world. So we talked about training sites, Live at the Bike as a resource to entertain and learn, And as I mentioned on Live with the Bike, I've played on around 100 episodes, different games. I've played every single game except '08 on the show.
Why not?
So, huh?
Why not?
I was locked out.
Okay.
It's definitely not a lack of wanting to play.
I was going to say, like, I thought you liked that game.
No, I do.
Yeah.
Which I want to play everything on the show just to showcase. And the camera doesn't catch everything that's going on at the table. Like, first of all, if the camera shot's on one person, obviously you can't see the other person. So there's a lot going on, or even just like the way hands are postured, or just like, looking at someone, you could sense certain things. So that's, as a commentator, like, we've all played on the show, and we try to communicate that. So a lot of things are really easy. Oh, why didn't person A fold here? Why do you call here? This is a stupid play. This is a smart play.
It all looks obvious when you're in God mode and you have all the information. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. When I was producing the World Poker Tour, or post-producer of the World Poker Tour, Mike Sexton, he actually had the presence of mind and the foresight to go, even though because at the time it wasn't live, we would actually shoot the whole thing. He would do commentating without knowing the cards, and then in post, he would then revoice new narration, new voiceover, as if he was doing live color commentary with the awareness of the cards. And it would be really easy to say, oh, because the flush came, oh, don't do that because the flush came, and yada, yada. But instead, he was sensitive enough and wise enough to go, I'm going to put myself in the position of that moment based on the information that I have at that moment, not knowing what happens afterwards, and I'm going to judge it based on the actual factors of positive EV and game theory and what was reasonable at the time, because Monday morning quarterbacking, especially in poker, is way too easy, and you got to give people more of a benefit of the doubt of going, in the moment, what could they know? There's always, in all of the range of hands that you could put someone on, there's always the X factor that it could be just complete garbage and the person's a sociopath or freaking out or made a mistake or misread their cards. And so there's always some chance that it's something that you couldn't possibly quantify, the black swan event.
And I've played with a lot of the players on stream and off stream, or just like know of them, know some of their rivalries, chemistries, relationships. So that's why I'm able to predict better, like, JJ, and shout out to the other commentators too, of just knowing probably what's going to happen based on our knowledge of the players' styles and the players' relationships. And
which could totally inform the opposite opinion based on
like
what your history.
Yeah. Right. So like there's standard plays, like, you say take certain lines that are normal, but then it could just throw it out the window if like
this guy will 4-bet with 7 deuce in the big blind just because he's the big stack and he can do the squeeze. And if people know that he does that, then suddenly calling with ace 10 off is not so crazy.
Big, yeah. So that leads into other poker products like the World Series of Poker and WPT. Shout out to them for obviously good production, but they are trying to sell the poker dream to the public. Like, if you play well enough with this set of cards, you win a WPT, money, fame, poker.
And that's actually true. It's just it's rare.
Yeah, it's not as but they need to like show that it's possible. Yeah. Whereas like if you don't even see something on screen or you don't even know it's a reality, you just don't know it's a reality.
I mean, but the same thing could be said for acting schools or sports coaching. Like there's a million games and industries where it's a pyramid of success, and very few people get the monster success or even the chance at monster success.
Right.
And, to me, that actually plays into, I have a script that's done well in a bunch of screenplay contests called Exabyte, and it's about artificial intelligence and the future of what happens when you're no better than a robot. Quick little actual fact, there's AI radiologists that are better than like 80% of radiologists. So if you're going to a human radiologist to check to see if you have cancer from a CAT scan or something, you're better off having a machine today, right now, that's the case. And that's just going to keep getting better. So if medical doctors are in trouble, and like there's something called Law Geeks with an X, and Law Geeks does like low-level associate lawyer work, more than paralegal, like actually reviews contracts and checks for precedents, etc. So if lawyers and doctors have their jobs in jeopardy, what is your granddaughter going to be able to do better than a robot? And so if you're going to say, well, I'm going to do I have a Ludic life, Ludic, Ludic life. I want to have a playful, joyful life. Then you might as well go for that which makes you feel good and fulfilled and creatively fulfilled, etc. I mean, obviously, if you want to have a family or a stable life, it's a different trajectory. But if what you want is the dream, arguably, that's going to become increasingly more reasonable compared to 100 years ago when robots couldn't do your job. Because in the future, there's going to be a shrinking number of jobs that you can do better than a robot.
Shout out to Andrew Yang's actually running for president and dealing with a lot of these topics. I'm not endorsing or not endorsing him, but he's actually dealing with these topics.
Yeah.
Even though his clickbait is the universal basic income of $1,000 a month, like the depth of what he's going through tackles a lot of issues that, as we saw with Mark Zuckerberg, dealing with the Senate may not be up to date on how the internet works.
Well, it's almost necessarily going to be out of date, but we have to keep moving it forward, however you choose to define it. But wink to my actual political colleagues who think the way I do, because I'm obviously right about everything.
So, yeah, I mean, these products also have a motivation to pump up certain players, the winners or certain poker celebrities. And
it's also the vicarious enjoyment. That's like part of, like, humans feel empathy and sympathy, and when you see someone succeed, you might have that schadenfreude mindset where it's like, screw him, take him down, I hate that he's successful. Or you might actually have, there's a term called mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A, one of my favorite concepts, and that is enjoying other people's happiness. And so that's part of what celebrity is you see Michael Jordan, you see how old I am by the age of my references, you see somebody successful and you celebrate them, that's why they're a celebrity, because they exemplify something that you like about yourself or something that you value, and so you actually get real enjoyment from their success. When LeBron does great, you feel great. When your home team does well, you feel well. And so that's actually a positive thing. That doesn't have to be a negative thing, because that does spread more happiness and joy. And I am starting a cult if anybody wants to send me money. Or at least I should.
Okay. Well, also, consequently, if you see somebody who's not like you, then it's when, like, some hater
I mean, that's the whole concept of hater.
Is like if somebody's doing well, like people hate on Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian because they're like,
and
killing
it's right
it.
to hate on them. No, I'm just kidding. They have their positive attributes.
They're playing, the game of humanity. They're just like trying to do what they can. We were just talking before the show about Dan Bilzerian, and just like I have two friends, Mike Yoshino and Ryan Fee, who've actually played with him and say he's played, reasonable enough that if you put him in a game where people are blasting off, he'll probably win. Did he really win as much as he claims? I don't know.
There's no way for us to know.
None of my business. I don't really care.
I mean, you could think, like, macroeconomically, there isn't that giant of a pool of super wealthy people who can lose 8 figures, 7 figures for that to be macroeconomically viable. But it's at least conceivable. You can't dismiss it.
It's possible. Not only that, it's just like, how do you get invited to these games? Like, would he be the one that you would want to play with in these games? Like, we were also talking about Molly's game before, and just like a lot of these games are built off like, oh, celebrities. Like, I guess they've already been outed. Like, Tobey Maguire is going to be there, Leonardo DiCaprio, like A-Rod. Once these celebrities and like these rich people want to like see what they're about in real life. And buy $100,000, go,
And if you could lose $100K, there's a bunch of games you could get invited to. But don't bring your script in your back pocket and, like, be chill.
Don't be like me. I'm just kidding. No, like, a shout out to those guys in the Hollywood Writers game. They know that, like, I've never been like, oh, I have the script, I want to make $1 million. I grounded from, like, the bottom up. Like, I was just like, screw it. Like, I made money in poker. Like, I'm going to try this route. And, I'm very lucky. Like, Jamie Ronheimer is one of my screenwriting mentors, and he got me on How I Met Your Mother. And, you've been there too, and a bunch of other people. It's like, I applied to UCL. I went to the screenwriting contest. Like, I actually finished top in, like, some TV scripts. Like, I have a How I Met Your Mother.
I mean, that's what you have to do. That's what we were talking about earlier on in the conversation of, like, getting external validation, having other people,
vouch for you,
vouch
your
for
journey,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I didn't have a script in my back pocket. Hey guys, read this. You're gonna see two big fake red flags, which is one, hey, I got a script in my back pocket. You've never seen anything like this. It's gonna be mind blowing.
It's going to be a giant franchise.
Yeah.
Although I think I've made that mistake.
And then the other one is just like, oh, I have this great movie idea. I just need somebody else to write it. Yeah, get out of here. Like, it is so hard to just like write something well. And like, I see a lot of these big franchises like the Marvel movies, like Avengers and say like The Dark Knight or Joker, or whatever. It's just like it is so hard to do justice to these characters that have like decades of history and just like do them honor.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of hilarious that, how subjective writing can be. You can't get people to agree on the best movies.
Right.
So if you can't agree on the movies, of course they're not going to agree on the best script. So the question is like, how well, do enough people like your stuff? Is there enough consistency? Is there a community that appreciates your stuff? And quick little tip, if anybody does want to be a writer, this is Matt Stone and Trey Parker advocated for this theory, and then I later found out that they stole from Aristotle. Can you believe they would steal from Aristotle?
South Park guys?
They're the South Park guys. Yeah. And so their theory is all scenes should follow consequentially, not just sequentially. So in 60 seconds, it just means if you're writing a script and you're storyboarding, plotting out the story and plotting out the story beats, each scene should follow from the previous scene. And the scenes can be connected with either the words therefore or the words but. But you should never connect the words and then. So if you're telling a story and the scene, and then this happens, and then this happens, you're in trouble. And I thought Matt Stone and Trey Parker came up with that because I saw them speaking in this great YouTube video. But it turns out that that's actually they stole from Aristotle. And if you want one more tip, Phil Lord and Chris Miller gave a speech at BAFTA, I think, talking about writing the Lego movie, etc. And I remotely knew them a million years ago. Is that a name drop? Not really. And they, but their speech is just fantastic and hilarious and gives a lot of great insight. And there is information to learn with screenwriting and with everything. My philosophy is, if there's publicly available information, you should try to learn it and be the A+ student. You don't necessarily have to follow it or do the same thing.
It exists.
But,
it exists.
But if there's information, it's like, why would you not want that information?
Sure.
Of course you would want the advantage of how the playbook of the top players or your opponents. And so, don't ever make a mistake out of ignorance. Make a mistake or make a choice because you've deliberately trying to achieve an effect, but don't do it out of laziness. That's the worst.
Damn. Mic drop. All right, let's get to your hands.
Okay.
This is the Hollywood home game ambiance. And when I was playing with Tony like a couple months ago on Live with the Bike, like, you guys know I tone it the way the heck down when I'm playing with you guys, and I will just like shut my brain off and just like play and try to
having a good
entertain.
Time. Yeah.
When I was on there with
Tony, I'm still trying to take their money, for the record. You can't tank. I still want to win. I just play too recklessly.
You're not trying. We're not trying to lose, but at the same time, we're not like trying to squeeze out every fraction of a DV, and not even close. And Tony was just like, "Oh my God, Wayne's got his game face on." I'm like, "Oh, I'm playing 2-3 no limit. I'm definitely not having my game face on." Watch me when I'm playing Doug Polk, and watch me when I'm playing, and then watch me when I'm at home. It's like a big, like, massive difference.
Sure.
So that's like, being on camera or being in a social setting, you need to calibrate for what the game is. The game in all pros, guess what? All bets are off. I'm squeezing every fraction. But like, even being a house player, like, I just can't be the person I used to be. Right. I have to calibrate. And like, I not only work with a lot of them, like, especially I mentioned this on broadcast, I work with lawyers or producers or somebody I need connections with. Guess what? We're friends now. We're checking the river, or I'm going to say, hey, don't call. I got the nuts. It's just, it is what it is. Poker. And
I'm probably a little bit more merciless than you, but you're a better person than I am.
I don't know about that, but just like, you just have to calibrate, because this is like real life, and like Upswing Poker, Run It Once, Crush Life Poker. These guys can all make you better poker players strategically,
right.
But to make the most money, hey, there's something, even if Dan Blazarian didn't actually do it, there's something to what he's preaching.
Well, I mean, again, like his strategy is to like justify his existence and create his bona fides.
Sure.
So, like a lot of that is just kind of fake it till you make it. Artificially inventing yourself. And sometimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you just tell enough people that you're successful, sometimes people just believe you.
Sure. Sometimes if you post the same accolades over and I'm just kidding. All right, let's get our.
I do have 14 accolades on 2 scripts in the past year, so he's making fun of me.
No,
Okay.
we're making fun of both of us. But let's get to the PokerCraft, or sorry, the hands you put on the shelf before we get into more trouble.
Yeah.
So, shout out to Byron. There's Dave Pickell. Seat 5, David Fury. He's executive produced 24 and Pinky the Brain, other stuff. Oh, there's Dan Abrams in seat 9.
I go by Peanuts, so that's how I'm Chiron. That's
There's
how I'm graphics.
Michael Penny, seat 2. Tony in seat 1. Byron's got pocket 8s under the gun. There's Gary in seat 4. Jamie Ronheimer, How I Met Your Mother, Will and Grace, and The Ranch in seat
Woohoo!
3.
Pocket Q.
So Byron raises 8s, and you, a.k.a. Peanuts, re-raises with 2 chicks at the same time.
Reasonable bet. I'm tripling.
Yeah, and then Tony, a.k.a. King of Queens.
God bless him.
He's
Calls.
king, yeah.
And it's like reasonable equity right here. I mean, Byron's got the.
Yeah, so
Problematic.
like a lot of viewers would be just like, oh, this guy plays so. It's like we're all friends and in
Yeah.
a social circle. We're not out to like,
Murder.
yeah, murder.
Although I
everybody.
did check my top set because I knew I needed them to catch up to make any money.
Right. So that's why you check, and then you bet the turn. Now that there's a lot of draws, and now you can lose the hand.
Yeah.
So you bet 90.
10's definitely good, obviously, but is his ace good or king? He's going to snap both.
And couldn't make any more with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, at least you didn't lose.
This is like
Yeah.
expected
So there's
flop
Peanuts
top
with
set,
top
C
set.
bet, and take it down.
And that's my Producers Guild of America, not the
Have everything.
Professional Golf Association.
Right.
It's my-
So many acronyms are different in different industries.
And by the way, my jacket, you probably can't tell, is a mini series of poker champion from 18 years ago. And I still have that jacket because I don't have any big wins since then.
But during
So
normal
BK, who's done, was it Mike and Molly, South Park?
Was
The
BK on
Ranch.
South Park?
I think so.
Okay.
If
I mean,
he,
they're
if he
all
wasn't,
hilarious.
it's not a good fictitious credit to have. So Peanuts, you got aces, and you raise it up.
I'm running good.
Oh, the other funny thing is when the viewers are like, "Oh, these are Hollywood writers are so broke." I'm like,
No, all these
Oh,
guys
yeah.
could play way higher.
They
Like,
just-
I'm broke by comparison, but these guys are rich guys.
So David Fury, the guy who executive produced 24, 10-7, shouts at 7-10 of hearts on the button. Byron Jack 4 hearts. And
Terrible flop for me.
Yeah, this is triple coordinated. Fury flops 2 pair.
Just call.
So you continuation bet, and we were just talking about this earlier about the triple coordinated boards when you have aces. Now this is a scary board because you, as an aware player, know there's so many things that can happen wrong. Somebody have 2 pairs, somebody have a pair and a straight draw, somebody could flop the straight, somebody could flop a set, somebody could semi-bluff with a flush draw. So Fury,
I'm not feeling good that he raised me.
sure. But as we know, he could have a flush draw, a pair and a straight draw,
Right, pocket jacks.
ace 10,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things going on. And there's a blank.
The blankiest of blanks.
Yep.
So that should be good for me. But I check it, and God bless him, he checks behind. That was a gift to me, and I'm grateful. Thank you, Fury.
And there's the 4-liner to a straight.
And that's a scary card. But there's 153 in the pot, and he underbets so little.
At least there's no recourse. Like, it's so hard for Peanuts to...
He wants to earn something, and he knows he's going to earn because I'm going to pay him off.
Yeah, after you check the turn, I
Yeah.
mean, and you bet so little.
So I think I lost the minimum.
Soul read, check fold.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable call in that spot in case he had like a busted spade draw, like ace 3 of spades.
Yeah. Or just ace 10 or something, you know? I think ace 10 would have played the same way.
So
Wayne was actually 21 years old at one time.
there's Phil Stark and Wheeze and I in the background. Wheeze has a film out, but yeah, we'll see what's coming on. And Jamie Ronheimer, one of my screenwriter mentors, limps
pretty
a
awesome.
9-4 suit.
That's pretty
Gary's
good
going to limp.
poker.
Gary's actually Jamie Ronner's cousin. He wrote for CBS Sports. Byron with the premium 10-4 offsuit.
Now, I have ace-3 suited. I'm a big fan when you have ace-x suited of having as many players see the flop for exactly this reason. Like, I do not want to raise people off their jack-x suited or queen-x suited.
Partially, yeah, it's reasonable, and you definitely need to have that in mind when having these kind of hands. But, you know, in certain game types where there's not that much action post-flop, you probably want to take it down pre. So Jamie flops 2 pair, top and bottom. Gary with a pair of 6s can hit a 6 or a queen.
So I led out with my nut flush draw,
Yeah.
and then Jamie raised because he's got 2 pair.
Sure.
And now I know I'm not doing great. I know I need a flush, but I call it. And then Gin, boom,
Easy
super
game.
lucky Dan. I got the nuts.
Spoilers, spades on the turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I check it because I think if I bet it, it telegraphs that I called on the flop with a flush draw. So that's why I checked it.
The other thing is, like, you guys, we all know each other very well. And, like, a lot of lines are definitely not going to be the ones you see in the training sites.
Yes, we'll just-
And in the end, nobody really cares with this dollar amount. Like,
Now everyone's making fun of my performance again. I'm
Oh,
not an
yeah.
actor. I'm a terrible actor. Look at me breathing out.
we totally make fun of Peanuts because if you've been living under a rock and don't know, anytime people sigh and have the nuts, then put their chips in, or sorry, anytime they sigh and then put the chips in, they pretty much have a nutted hand.
Now, can you pause it for a second?
Yeah.
So what I did here, this is actually a strategy that I'm quite proud of, although I'm sure a lot of people have done it before me and do it better than me. What I did was I called on the turn instead of raising. I thought if I raised on the turn, that telegraphs too much that I have a flush, and Jamie could have folded, knowing that that he's beat, and he would have to get super lucky to fill up. But then I bet blind to give the impression that I'm still on a flush draw, that I don't have the made flush, and I'm trying to bluff him off, because I figured if a blank comes on the river, by betting blind and not raising on the turn, if a blank comes, he was probably going to call me anyway. But if another spade comes, he might actually still pay me off. At least that was my theory, because maybe I didn't have the flush and I was trying to represent that I had the flush. And so that's why I did this weird maneuver of calling on the turn instead of raising and then betting blind, because I thought it was more likely to get money in. But again, just like the Princess Bride Aya King Powder thing, you could outthink yourself.
No, I mean, this
Other
is
level
reasonable.
C.
This is why we have people who play on the show, back here on the Monday Talk Show, to go through people's thinking processes. Because, like I said, I'm familiar with most of the players on the show, and I don't even know what they're thinking all the time. And, sometimes I'm wrong, and then other times I have insight. So I try to explain what's actually going on.
Now, in our history, Jamie has known that I've also played recklessly a lot. So I have bluffed on flush boards before, and so you can't really be down
He
on
knows.
Jamie for calling.
Oh, yeah, he's not happy, but his hand's, strong. He could beat, a lot of things, and
Yeah.
just, it is what it is. I mean,
Who left that seat? Who left that seat?
he has, or you can have a lot of bluffs as well. Just,
Yeah. Or I could have ace king with the ace of spades, and
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of stuff. You can have open-ended. You have 3-5, 5-7,
Sure.
7-8.
There's definitely nothing wrong with betting there. I'm just
So
saying this
in the end, it's just like
top and bottom.
I get asked about all these hands all the time. It's like I had 2 pair of show lays down. It's like, 1, do you know the opponent? 2, it's not like you didn't have anything. Like if you
Right.
don't have anything, if you have top pair third kicker, yeah, you probably may want to lay it down unless the guy's like a habitual bluffer.
right.
But if you had something, you know what? Chalk it up to a cooler and just add it to your history notes.
And again, over time, his raise on the flop would have earned him money, because I'm not likely to make the flush. I'm only going to get the flush 36% of the time.
34.
34% of the time. Thank you.
But that's just the flush. You could also make running aces
Trips.
up,
Right.
trips, straight. So it actually was not that bad in your situation.
But you made a straight in the Jack 4 and VK. I remember. I remember everything.
No, but they were joking that GTO doesn't apply enough. Of course not.
Yeah.
How many people here know?
So what do I have here?
I don't know. Or maybe I got the wrong video and you were not involved. Oh, you have cards.
Yeah. What am I playing?
Oh, there you
here's
go.
Queen Deuce.
Cute.
If I were Israeli Ron, I would have played it better and won the hand. But we'll see what happens here. Look at that! I got bottom pair. Game on.
So spoilers, you didn't win the hand. Shout out to Israeli Ron.
It's like Fight Club. We don't talk about it.
It's just like
This whole thing is just a setup for the rest of our game. I'm just trying to show you guys. This is a long time.
David Chiang says, I just watched How I Met Your Mother Season 6, Episode 2. Did not see Wayne. I am in the
And
with Clarence.
I lost
Right
money.
side with my friend Cindy Land from UC St. Pete.
It's okay. Only Israeli Ron is the Queen Deuce master.
Yeah.
We'll leave it to him.
Might survive losing $37.
Yeah, it's not normal for people to put bankroll on table, so these guys are just not putting
I mean, this
anything
is such a
on the table.
minimal amount of money for these guys. Like I can't afford to lose $500 every time,
Guess
but
what? They probably didn't
these
have-
guys
more likely they didn't have anything.
don't even know their
no.
100,000th digit. in
And
their
they have
bank account.
they get residuals from the films they've made. Like if you have like
God bless the Writers Guild of America.
yeah, shout out to them. And like if a TV show goes into syndication, boom.
Now you see this. This is me raising 25, trying to steal everybody's pots because pre-flop I tend to play pretty tight, but every once in a while I'll make one of these reckless plays. One for fun and two to vary my game so that I'm not predictable.
Right. So
So this was supposed to be a squeeze where I take it down pre-flop. It didn't work out that way, but it didn't turn out too terribly either. So everybody has a better hand than me.
so this is something that happens in poker, which is you could do something like this and it could have a positive result. Whereas if you do something like this in real life, probably not so good.
Yeah.
But that's what the entertainment factor is in poker.
And I don't do that with 7-3 every time. It's just to mix up my game. But because I raise so big, it people are reasonable to infer that I have an ace big kicker.
And then you flop the best hand anyway and you see bet and you're going to take it
Yeah.
there. So professional.
It's nice when it works out like that. When-
But the thing is, like, even if it didn't, and then you show, and I mean, you can infer that you had the best hand anyway because they folded.
Right.
But yeah, this is the fun, in these games and these social settings where you just, even if the play is negative EV, like you just do this stuff to increase the amount of fun people are having.
Yeah. I mean, if I was, trying to squeeze, I would never play like that. But I can be a reckless player from time to time.
So you have
I teach better than I play.
King Queen off, and they're just limping in. I'm just showing this as a bad beat. Like the guy, like Tony flops a jack. Spoilers, but I'm just saying. Oh, Peanuts, you're so unlucky. Oh man, you run so bad.
Everybody loves to say how unlucky they are. Everybody thinks that if the odds were reasonably distributed, they would be super rich. But
Yeah. Oh, is this
I
a
think I
bomb
run
pot?
pretty good.
Oh man, I got this wrong.
Calls 10 deuce hearts.
But that's another thing. King Queen off, a lot of people want to raise with it. I want people with King Jack and King 10 to call. So that's not a hand.
Oh, this
where
wasn't the hand. Oh, anyway, it was a bomb pot. Like I think it was a $10 bomb pot. And I just want to say, oh, you have the best hand. Oh,
Oh
here's the
no,
hand.
poor me. I should set up a Patreon. Might make $3.
Hey, it's $3 more. Yeah. And now you put a big chunk of money there. What do you have?
Pocket eights.
Byron's got pocket eights. Oh, this is the
Did we already see this?
yeah,
hand?
this one's. So yeah, it did the loop. So we're back here. This is Dan Abrams.
I got one more crackpot idea.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think that you know how Facebook controls your Facebook feed, and it has its own opaque algorithm deciding whose information you get. Same thing with Twitter. I think, like a newspaper headline, you should create a layout, be able to create like a customizable layout, and say, okay, I always want to see Wayne's tweets. Give me the first of Wayne's 3 tweets, and then I want to see Vicky's tweets, and I want to see this person's. You should be able to lay out, and then every morning when you open up your browser, you can see you've already decided what the prioritization is. And on top of that, so that's one feature that I want one of you to go create so that you're not beholden or not subject to the control of this, Wizard of Oz that's controlling when you see posts and when you don't see posts. You should be able to decide yourself and have that control across social media and be able to create such a layout with Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, etc. But also, and this is another feature that I want one of you to go create, is because ad space on the internet is so cheap, it's like a tenth of a penny or less. You should be able to buy that out. You should be able to say, okay, I'm going to put $1 in my account every 2 weeks, and anytime somebody shows me an ad, you're going to take a tenth of a penny from me and then not show me the ad. So it's not going to be an ad blocker. So the sites still get their money, but stop selling me so cheap. Like, my time is worth more than a tenth of a penny an ad. You should be able to buy that out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Go make that. Go get rich on that and give me a shout out.
You want to talk any short blurb about Exabyte?
Oh, yeah. So Exabyte is a sci-fi script that has earned 9 separate accolades in screenwriting contests. And I have another script called Vacationers I co-wrote with Grant Taylor, and that has earned 5 accolades. And we actually have some money lined up behind that, some stars. Wonderful Zoe Quist. Zoe, you want to make a quick little appearance? No, she doesn't? Okay. Zoe Quist is my director on Vacationers and my producer on Exabyte. And I got some big name talent taking a look at both. And we have some distribution lined up for one and just trying to put stuff together. So if any of you have 5 to 10 million just laying around in your couch cushions, give me a call.
So when they win Sundance and then the Oscars, you heard it here first on PokerCraft. And all the people from PokerCraft end up going on Joe Rogan. So I'll see you on Joe Rogan.
Sounds good.
All right. That's it for guys. I'm going to paste Dan Abrams' TEDx talk in the chat. So
thanks, everybody.
Boom.
Good karma to you.
All right. See you guys next week.